Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is safety. And when we think about safety, we can't really think about safety without thinking about trust, because we're trusting whatever protections we have in place to keep us safe. So safety and trust are inextricably linked, and we get to talk about that today, which should be really, really interesting. But before we get started, let me say good morning to you, Rosalind, and good morning to everybody else who's joining us. It's great to be here with you, and let's just take a couple minutes to get present. So let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells and your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, your molecules, your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale, exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together. Vigorously rub your hands together. Feel the friction, the motion, the pressure, the temperature, and the tickling and tingling when you stop, and allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables you to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So today we're talking about safety. And a lot of us have concerns around safety, and what drives these concerns most often, what's underpinning the concern about safety is fear. Fear of physical harm, fear of emotional harm, and how we address those fears is often by trying to control our environment. And good morning, Robin. Great to have you here with us. We're talking about safety this morning, and how safety and trust are inextricably linked, because whatever protections we might put in place in any given situation, in order to feel safe, we need to be able to trust in the integrity of those protections, whether they're emotional, physical, circumstantial, whatever. And so it's interesting, because if we find a path to trusting life, then we can sort of bypass a lot of the defense and protection that we might feel the need to create in order to feel safe. So I guess the question is, what is this? What does it mean to be safe? We talk about playing it safe, and a lot of us have conversations where we just say things like, I don't feel safe. I want to create a safe space. This doesn't feel like a safe space. So what does that mean? If we're creating a safe space, we might be trying to elicit agreements from other people that we're engaged with around rules of communication, rules of engagement, for example. And it's only in our trust of those rules that we then can feel safe, right? That we can make ourselves feel vulnerable. There are all kinds of assumptions that we have when we're creating this safe space, right? There's parameters of engagement that we're outlining that we expect others to adhere to. We expect that people are going, make an agreement and then honor that agreement within this space so that we can allow ourselves to be vulnerable in a certain way, that we can let down our defenses. And underlying that is a trust. Good morning, Jenny. Welcome. So good to have you here with us this morning. We're talking about safety and trust, actually, and how you can't really experience a sense of safety unless you have a sense of trust, whether it's in another person. You're trusting that they are going to be there for you in a certain way, or that they're going to act a certain way, or that they receive you or perceive you in a certain way. It's all based on trust. And so what I'm thinking is that we get to maybe by trusting the unfoldment of life, we get to feel safe without having to exercise all these controls or attempts at control in our environment. That's not to say that there aren't certain precautions to take when you're doing certain things, like if you're parachuting, you don't just want to say, oh, I'm going to trust the universe that my parachute's been properly packed. You want to make sure that the parachute's been properly packed. And those are important precautions. And even when your parachute is properly packed, it doesn't mean that parachuting is safe, so to speak, right? So Rosalind says, am I safe now? What is the fear? Fear of letting go of the known. Fear prohibits access to ... And I'll fill that in with safety. Yes. So fear is feeling unsafe, right? And sometimes we have an impulse of fear that lets us know that there are threats. Sometimes fear is self-manufactured, and other times fear is a really good signal to be paying attention, to be going into a more alert state. So if we can, I think that there are different degrees of fear. There's fear that is a response to an imminent threat. And oftentimes we perceive a threat that isn't there, because we have our own insecurities. We have our own predilections to seeing threats everywhere. Perhaps like as a child growing up in a dysfunctional environment, there were threats all the time. And so there's a conditioned response to perceived threat everywhere, even when it isn't there. And what's underlying that is an underlying feeling of being unsafe. And so there, it flips back and forth. There's the fear and the lack of safety, and also the lack of trust of self. So self to determine, is this safe? Can I trust my assessment? Can I trust myself to know how to respond appropriately, for example? So Rosalind says safety is a construct. Danger is a construct. What are we willing to sacrifice for safety? That's such a good question, Rosalind. Staying in a job you don't like to pay the bills? Question mark. Great question, Rosalind, because what happens with trying to create safety is that we often create a smaller and smaller world, a smaller and smaller context, so that we can maintain at least the illusion of control. And oftentimes what we consider safe isn't really safe at all. So for instance, staying in a job you don't like to pay the bills, and then all of a sudden that job gets pulled out from under you anyway. I've seen that happen with people where, they were staying in a position at a company because they considered it prudent and safe, and then it wasn't safe anymore because they got pushed out of their position. So oftentimes in the name of safety, we limit ourselves, we limit our world, we limit our expression. It's not safe to say what you think. That's often the case for kids in a dysfunctional environment, and then they grow into adults having learned that it's not safe to say what they think, and it becomes very hard for them to express themselves. So Jenny says, it seems every time I lower my guard, I get taken advantage of. I take a loss in one way or another. Hard lessons I've learned since living in Colorado. So Jenny, I think that is a situation that a lot of people encounter. And here's the thing. When we lower our guard, what happens is we often override our own knowing. So, and we consider that it's lowering our guard or trusting someone. But what it is denying our own knowing. And one of the things that I coach people in is be willing to know what you know. So for instance, we get a gut feeling about a situation. And this is tough because it's hard to know, is that just my reactivity or is that my knowing? It's hard to discern that sometimes, but we might get a gut feeling about somebody and then we override that. We call that letting down our defenses, but what happens is we're overriding our knowing, and then that person turns out to be the way that we anticipated they would be. So we come back to we weren't trusting our own knowing. We weren't trusting ourselves. And then we get disappointed and we end up getting hurt or taken advantage of. But if we honored our knowing in the first place, even though it didn't paint that other person in the most pleasant light, then we still, we protected ourselves by honoring our knowing. So Rosalind says, safety is the space where I am not in a defensive posture, as you say, trust. Yeah, so when I feel safe enough in myself, when I trust myself and my discernment, then I can navigate other environments. I can not have to be defensive, and I can be more present to the circumstances. Jenny says, my mom stayed in a crappy job as a front desk clerk at a motel for 21 years to pay the bills. And so, Jenny, your mom's not alone in doing something like that, because the safety or the fear of the unknown, making another choice was greater than the dislike of that job that they felt was safe, that your mom felt secure in, because at least they say the devil you know is better than the devil you don't. And that's a hard choice, but the thing is, we keep our lives small in so many ways by being fearful, by staying what we think is safe. So Jenny says, Jenny got her car stolen when she was helping the person from an abusive situation. Well, so the thing, there probably were signals. But that's a big blow. It's a big blow when you're trying to help someone, and then you get hurt in one way or another. So Robin says, I have trust issues from words not being truthful, need to replay an issue in my relationship. So Robin, yeah, when we're in relationship, it's really easy to get off center. It's really easy to lose our connection to self and to our own knowing, because I've seen so many relationships where one partner gaslights the other, and sets up situations and lies and cheats and does all kinds of things, and then denies it and gets into the other person's head and twists things around, and all of that serves to undermine one's trust in oneself. And so it's important to be finding ways to stay connected to yourself in relationships. So you often have a sense when something's wrong. Somebody can be lying to your face and you sense that it's wrong, but you don't have proof, and it causes us to question our own knowing, which is, it's very, very, very disorienting and kind of erodes our trust in ourselves. And when we don't have trust in ourselves, we can't trust others. And so Jenny says, yes, she was afraid to leave her safety zone about her mom, who worked at the motel for 21 years. Yeah. So it's interesting what we consider safe. So in a relationship where someone isn't telling us the truth, it's not safe. It becomes safe if we're safe in ourselves and we can navigate them not telling the truth. We know they're not telling the truth and we can navigate that situation, then we can still feel safe within ourselves. But when you're in a situation where your partner is lying to you, the question is, what's the trade-off? Like what keeps you there? because maybe there's a sense of financial safety. I know a lot of folks are in a situation where the financial safety of the relationship is such that leaving that relationship, however unsafe it feels emotionally, the threat, the financial challenge outside that relationship is even more frightening and feels less safe than navigating the psychological terrain of the relationship itself. We often, we are, there are times when our choices are between bad and worse versus good and bad. You know, there are times when our choices reflect degrees of fear rather than degrees of potential. And I think it's very interesting to see the places where we will choose a negative circumstance because at least it's familiar, because at least we know how to navigate it. And making a choice to create a new circumstance would be so disruptive that it behooves us to stay where we are. It's an important thing, I think, to navigate consciously. So Jenny says, my mom started the job right after I was born. So that was a long part of your life that she was doing that job. And Jenny continues, yeah, I dislike my trusting of people. I something that they are out to con or hustle or steal. Well, one of the things is that when we have that expectation, we often attract those people. Oh, I got you. So Jenny says, I barely know that they are out to con or hustle or steal. I would venture to say, Jenny, that on some level, you know, and that's a hard thing to face. I was involved with a guy, not emotionally, business-wise, involved with a guy who was putting together these real estate deals. And I thought I was vetting them for like 6 months before I actually got involved with them. But part of me knew, and I ended up getting royally screwed in a deal that it was just a freaking nightmare. And it had, it has consequences for me forever, and part of me knew. And I went ahead anyway, because I think that I was seeing it as a way out. I was seeing the money potential, so there was a greed factor, and I allowed that to overwhelm or override my trusting my own intuition, because I really wanted what this person was offering. I saw it as a path to greater financial freedom. And Jenny says I was very naive. I could say I was naive, but I think the truth is that I wanted it to be true. And I think that we often override our own knowing, wanting things to be true. And therefore we don't look at the whole picture. And we don't assess it with as critical an eye as we might, because we want things to be different than they are. We want to be able to give someone the benefit of the doubt, even though we have a bad feeling about them. And I think that that's a way a lot of us get ourselves in trouble in a big way. And what happens then is it undermines our sense of safety, because it undermines our sense of trust in ourselves and in our own knowing. Robin says intuition. Yeah, intuition, you know, we call these gut feelings intuition, but the truth is that our other than conscious awareness is processing all kinds of information all the time. And it often gets communicated to us through a gut feeling. It's not that it's unfounded, it's just that it's cues that we're not necessarily conscious of. Jenny says, coming from Wyoming, it's a lot different in the big city. I get that, Jenny. I get that. You know, that there's a predisposition to trust people. And that's a beautiful thing, but it also can be really painful when there are people that just take advantage. And there are people that just take advantage. And there are people that are really brilliant con artists that know how to manipulate people emotionally, that know how to find our vulnerabilities and play on them. And it's just awful that people do that. But I agree with you, there are people that do, and it's easy to fall prey to them. And we just get to heighten our BS meters, you know, to pay attention. So Rosalind says, if there's no immediate threat, methods to diffuse the inner energy of making things different from what they are, or ability to discern programmed responses. I don't understand. Let's see. There's no immediate threat. What are methods to diffuse the inner energy of making things different from what they are, or the ability to discern programmed responses? Now I get it. That's tough. It's tough to notice. We get to cultivate our observer, to be observing ourselves and noticing, and to observe ourselves not with judgment, but with curiosity. I've seen people invest tons of money in scams and just totally lose it. And I've lost money that in things that looked safe, you know, that were vetted. So Robin says, we need another meeting on this subject. And Jenny says, yeah, definitely undermines safety. Country smart, learning street smart. LOL. Yeah, it's a big thing, even for city smart to learn street smart, you know, to be able to pay attention to the cues, to listen more deeply and clearly, rather than, you know, wanting everything to be rainbows and unicorns. You know, that's been a big lesson for me. So anyway, perhaps we will revisit this. I think it's a rich conversation, and I want to thank you all for your engagement in it. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live here each weekday morning on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel. And I encourage you to check out all the other awesome programming on Enlightened World Network and Enlightened World Living. And Rosalind says, does ego play a role in safety? Perhaps the wisdom comes from the kinder and quieter inner voice. Ego can be hurtful. And on that, I don't even have time to respond. Jenny says, happy lunar eclipse and so much love to all of you. Until next time, hope to see you again here soon.